next Thursday, we're not meeting because you're all going to be doing something else, as am I. I'm going to be having turkey, and my wife months ago made the sweet corn for our whole clan, and we're going to have that and mashed potatoes. And see, and now you're going to get hungry thinking about all of this. But I will stop right there. But because of that, because we're all doing that next weekend, we're not meeting next Thursday. We're not meeting here. But the week after, on the 4th of December, I know I'm using that month, December 4th, is the next time we gather together. Where 2025 went, I do not know, but it's quickly passing. And on the 4th will be Dean Stinchfield. Will be with us again, and looking forward to him being with us each time. But we're looking forward to today. And you're going to stop with announcements. We'll have some others later to do. But Lisa Holt is with us, and love it every time she speaks. When she gets up front to speak, when she talks to you in between services or other times throughout the week, it's you always walk away learning something or knowing something or appreciating something. So, Lisa, we are so glad that you are here. Looking forward to what you're going to share with us today about blended families. And come on up, and we want to welcome you here.
Well, good afternoon. I am very glad to be here, and for the majority of my life, I have been part of a blended family. And I don't have all the answers for blended families, but I do have all the questions. And that's what I really want to talk about today, is just helping you form questions and conversations and get understanding between each other so that you can have a much more successful opportunity as you grow together as a family. I'm going to make sure I hit this right. Middle. Okay. Oopsie. All right. I'm sorry. Do you guys remember the Brady Bunch? All right. Well, this was the very, very, very first family that television ever introduced us to that was a blended family. Here's the story of a lovely lady. You remember the whole thing? Okay. So we had Carol and her daughters, and we had Mike and his sons, and isn't it amazing that they each had kids the same age? How lovely. Isn't it also lovely that they were both widowed, and there were no extra parents lingering in the dark? But anyway, this show was on in my formative years when my dad was still alive, and I did not miss an episode. So I look at this and remember what I'm going to say to you. They did us a little dirty. They made it look a little easier than it really is. However, we have an opportunity to look at our role models and do better. Okay, that was our start. So this is my original family, and my dad there, who died 3 years after this picture was taken, was an advertising executive, and during the Brady Bunch years, we lived in Connecticut, and he was on Madison Avenue. Think Mad Men. That was exactly that season. So when I tell you I never missed an episode, that is a true statement, because as a daughter of an advertising person, you watch television whether you wanted to or not. That was like my chore after school. You have to watch Brady Bunch and make sure you watch The Partridge Family. Don't miss Gilligan's Island. You know, that was kind of our job because Dad wanted feedback on the commercials. He didn't care about the shows. It was the commercials. And so the Brady Bunch is just sort of a fun memory for me because it reminds me of the original family. And then a few years after that, when my mom got remarried, this is their wedding picture, and you will notice there's one more person. The little darling girl standing next to my stepdad, her name is Heidi. She is 9 years old, and unlike a lot of families, she came to live with us even though her parents were divorced and her mother was alive. They made the decision for her to be part of our family. So we had a really kind of unique situation because my mother was widowed, my stepfather was divorced, and we had a fully custodial child who had her own mother. Not common in any way, but that was our experience. And so, what I want to start with is this. By the way, this picture was taken at the Sacramento airport of all this baggage. And I show it to you because this is really what a blended family looks like when they move in. Everybody has their own stuff, and frankly, it isn't just the stuff they're taking from their bedrooms. and their yearbooks and all of that. It's really a lot of baggage that comes from pain. Because the only way you get into a blended family is either from death or divorce. And neither one of those are fun. And so when you put children from both sides of those equations, even if they're both divorced or they're both widowed, like the Brady Bunch, you still have a lot of children and parents coming into a new situation that have been through trauma. They've been through brokenness and sadness. And so I know this sounds super depressing. It will get better, but we have to tell the truth here. Everybody's coming in a little under the weather. And so there's a lot of work for us to do to help make everybody feel like they're part of this new experience. And so one of the things that we want to talk about is the difference between what it feels like for the kids and the parents who've had loss versus the kids and the parents who've been through divorce. And our family, as I shared, had one of each. And maybe yours does too, or maybe you have both on the same side. But the pain and the hurt is different. So for those who have had loss, there is an enormous amount of grief that can be very overwhelming. And for children, grief can be a really, really extraordinary situation. And no matter how many years go in between the loss and the new marriage, those children are still thinking about that parent that was lost. And they're still trying to keep that person relevant, even though all these new changes are taking place. Children have come from a situation of loss also will often feel really abandoned. They feel like that parent left. Now, obviously the parent didn't leave because they wanted to. They died. But children don't have an ability all the time to kind of understand it the way that we understand it as adults. They see it as some kind of a choice that they chose to leave me. They chose to leave my life. And of course they didn't, but children have a hard time learning those uniquenesses. Children who come from these situations also frequently deal with what we call cataclysmic thinking. And if you're not familiar with that, that is when every time you have a headache, it's a brain tumor. Every time you have a skinned knee, you're going to need a knee replacement. It's the idea that everything that happens is going to go to the full extent of tragedy. And the reason a lot of kids get that is because they started out with tragedy, and it shapes their thinking. And even though it's kind of an immature type of thinking, it can be very hard to work with children who think that way. It takes them growing up and maturing and having other positive life experiences to understand that everything that happens doesn't end tragically. Some kids and parents who come out of a lost situation have anger that God allowed their spouse to die or their parent to die. And that lingering anger can turn into a root of bitterness if it's not managed. And so these are all the kinds of things that are really characteristic of families who go through this. And finally, there's a ton of children who go through loss that end up with some insecurity and anxiety issues because all they have seen is something they can't trust. They can't trust their parent to be there because they died, and sometimes they will cling almost uncharacteristically to the other parent because it's all they have left. And so all of these things are good to keep in mind because they're different than what we're going to see on the other side of our equation, which is the children and the parents that have been through a divorce. Whoopsie, I missed it. There we go. So families who've been through a divorce, there can be a lot of anger, both at the parent side and the children's side, that the marriage was broken. And children sometimes will choose sides in a divorce. They'll decide it was mom's fault or it was dad's fault. They may not have any living clue what really happened, but they have their own impression. And remember that their impression comes from what they could witness. They heard conversations, maybe just part of it, but they heard a conversation. They witnessed the tail end of an argument. They maybe saw a text message. There were certain things they were exposed to, and they formed thoughts from that. And a lot of times they make decisions about who the good guy and the bad guy are, and they may be completely apart from what the reality is. But you need to know that your children are looking, and they are making observations, and they're making impressions from those observations. Also, children in this situation can feel a lot of confusion over navigating the non-custodial parent. So they have a parent they primarily live with and another parent, and very rarely you hear situations where the kids have equal back and forth with parents. Sometimes you do, but that's not super common. And so sometimes that confusion or trying to negotiate it in a way that makes everybody comfortable causes stress for children, especially if mom and dad don't agree on what that custody plan should look like. And especially if there's harsh words exchanged when the pickups don't go the way they should or the drop-offs aren't successful. The kids are often the ones that are left with the acrimony of hearing mom and dad not say, you were supposed to be here at 3 o'clock. I've been sitting here 30 minutes waiting for you. And that's the way the children are welcomed into the car to go to that parent, is hearing mom and dad argue. I'm just bringing this to your attention because I want you to understand that this is where these kids are coming from, and this is what they're bringing home when they've lived through these kinds of conversations. And finally, like the friends who have had loss, these children often do have abandonment issues. They often feel, I missed one, I'll go back. They have abandonment issues. They feel they were left behind sometimes. They sometimes feel that the divorce was their fault or that they're being punished some way for something they did. Usually never, ever the case, but they will feel that. They also sometimes deal with future relationship and commitment trauma. In other words, they struggle to decide to get married or to make a job choice that looks like a big commitment, or to buy a house, or to just do big things, because in their mind, the big thing, which was their parents' marriage, didn't hold together. And so they see brokenness as an option for every kind of commitment that they're going to need to make going forward. And so that is not an uncommon experience for children of divorce, to struggle with the idea of having fear and anxiety toward decision making. So when we think about bringing people together who've been through loss and or who've been through divorce and bringing them into a new family, you need to realize that in addition to the pain, the other thing that's in those suitcases is expectations. They all have expectations. New mom has expectations, dad has expectations, and all the kids have expectations. And the interesting thing is, we don't always talk about what those expectations are. Sometimes the children's expectations are fantasy related. The new dad is going to be wonderful. He's going to be so much easier to work with than the old dad who we no longer have because he's left the family. Or the new mom is going to be just like Cinderella's mom. She's going to be a wicked stepmother, and it's just going to be torture. Or when they have to look at each other, they have ideas about the other children that are being put into the blend. So everybody comes in with expectations. And the challenge is to get those expectations put on the table and shared so that you can begin to build a really healthy family. And the two words that need to be at play in a new family are this: truth and trust. Those are the two words that need to become your hallmark. You need to always be telling the truth, and you need to say things and do things in a way that builds trust. When you tell your children things that are not true, they will not trust you. And you think, well, what would you ever tell them that's not true? Well, I can tell you some stories of family friends that I know. I know one woman who didn't tell her daughter the truth about why she and her husband were divorced, the girl's dad, because she thought she was too young to hear it. And I said to her one day, well, she's going to hear it. It's either going to be from you or someone at church. Let's be clear, 275 people at church know what happened. Are you wanting her to find this out in the bathroom? Or from her life group leader who slips because she assumes it's public information? And she looked at me and I said, seriously, tell her. It's a sad story, but it's her story. She's got to live with it. She's got to grow up with this. And so telling her the truth will build trust. But if you keep giving her this, we just didn't get along, she's not going to think very well of either one of you, because apparently divorce is what you do when you just can't get along. It was way more complicated than that. Their story was powerful and it was painful. And she finally did tell her, but in my personal opinion, she waited way too long. That little girl should have known from a very young age that there was some significant issues. And so truth and trust are things that we need to share. Jesus said to the disciples, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." And he was referring, of course, to a lot of things, but he was also referring to our houses. And so we need to be houses that have harmony, and houses that are united, and houses that work together and have common goals, common values, and common expectations. You know, honestly, blending a family is really more like a corporate merger than it is a wedding. If you've ever been through a corporate merger, two companies come together, and it starts out really adorable. You get a new logo, and you might get, like coffee mugs from the new company with the name and the sweatshirt. It's so cute. And they really are confident that the quarter zip, the sweatshirt, and the gummy bears with the label on them is all you need to be part of the new company. That quarter zip, those gummy bears, you're good. You got it all. And I promise you, a corporate merger is a little more complicated. But here's what the corporate merger shows that we see in the marriage. The first is a change in leadership. Oh, yes, we have a change in leadership in a corporate merger. In fact, the question is always which CEO gets to be CEO. And so there's always a little dueling in between the companies whether A or B will be the head of the new corporation. And then we have the clash of the cultures. Are we going to be the company that gives unlimited PTO, or are we going to be the company that has 10 days and you must sign out? We have to choose. You see, all of these things, culture, identity, branding, dynamics, all of these things that are true in the corporate world are true in your new family. You have a new name, a new brand, new kids, and new positions. And I want to talk about those new positions for just a minute. Mom and dad who go into a blended family now have each of them a new title. They are now just mom and stepmom. They're now dad and stepdad. And the kids have new titles. They are daughter and stepdaughter and stepsister. So the kids get more titles than the parents, which is more complicated. So you are now a daughter, a stepdaughter, a child, a sister, and a stepsister. You have 4 titles just at the dinner table. And I'm going to say this, nobody wants a resume that's that complicated. In fact, when people ask me about my family, I'm constantly saying, well, I have 2 sisters, one of them is biological and one of them isn't. And I usually say it that way, or I try to say she's my stepsister. I love her dearly, so I don't really like to get into the step thing. But I always bring the fact that she's not biological, because when they see her, they're always like, oh, you guys don't look alike. Well, no, we don't. Surprise, But they see my brothers, and the 4 of us together, we do have a family resemblance, and then you bring her in, and she looks different. And so it kind of tells itself. There's always that story of, well, okay, and you're a lot younger, and the story begins to take shape. So let's talk about a little bit the conversations that we can have. And these are mostly for teens and young adults. Little kids, we're going to have to grow with conversations. But there's a lot of things that you can talk to about. Whoa, did I get that? There we go. Okay. We can talk with adults and young children, adults and teens. These are the conversations. Here's the first one. What are they going to call the new parent? And you want to choose something that's really honoring, but it needs to be agreeable to everybody, and the kids should have some input. It's not a good idea, in my mind, to tell a 12-year-old that they need to call someone dad or mom, unless they want to. If they want to, that's wonderful, but if they don't, I promise you that will cause a lot of anger down the road, because they're being forced then to have an experience with someone that may not reflect how they feel. And in our case, we never called our stepdad by his title. We always called him by his first name. And the reason was because it felt like we were stepping on our dad who had died. And we were always really thankful that he let us call him by his first name because that was comfortable. And all these years later, I still call him that. It just feels comfortable. And so we really need to honor kids, and we need to honor adults. And I would say if you're the parent in the story, be creative. Maybe there's a nickname you want to be called. Maybe you have some fun name that people called you in high school that you thought was hilarious, and the kids could call you that or something. But be creative. Make it a fun thing for your family, but don't make it an edict, because I promise it won't be comfortable. It'll end up being a hurt pocket. Okay, next question. What is going to be required of the teenagers? Now, if you have teenagers from two different families coming together into one different family, there's no way it's the same. One family probably has after-school chores and maybe jobs, and the other family may not. One family may say, we give all of our kids a car when they turn 16, or we pay for their gas and their car insurance, and the other family is like, you can get a job and do it yourself. And I'm not here to judge either side. I'm just telling you the differences. And when you have families with different expectations, I promise you there's going to be an opportunity for hurt feelings if we aren't A, communicative, and responsible about what we are expecting. For example, are you going to help the kids with college? Have you saved for that? Well, if you haven't, the time to tell them this is before their senior year of high school. Really, it is. And it may feel uncomfortable because you always thought you would, and you always planned to, but then you ended up with your husband dying, or you and your wife divorced, and the finances changed. All of those things are understandable, but you need to be respectful of your kids to help them grow up knowing we're not going to be able to help you with college because things kind of went a little out of the box a few years ago. And you know what? Mature adults can do this. And those children will respect and honor knowing what is expected of them more than they will finding out at the last minute that, oops, we meant to talk to you about that. So that's one way that we have healthy conversations with our teenagers. Who pays for what? And also the last one on there is about how will holidays be celebrated. That's really just kind of an amalgam of culture questions. Are we going to expect you are we going to take family vacations with everybody? Well, again, that depends on the age of the kids, and it depends on whether they live in the same state, whether they're all in the same home, all of those things. The hard part of a conversation like this is we're talking about a broad band of dynamics, but the point of it is that the new family is going to need to figure out what its culture is, what its mission is, and what they are expecting both of themselves as parents and what the children can expect from them as they grow together. And so if your family was always a Christmas open presents family and the other family opened them on Christmas Eve, you guys are got some work to do. You're just going to have to figure it out. And maybe if everybody's at a higher age, like teens and college age kids, maybe you do two holidays. Maybe you celebrate with one set of kids and another day you celebrate with another set of kids. Because you know what? Flexibility is really important. Sometimes you just have to say, what's going to work for us? How do we do this in a way that makes everybody feel good? And how do we honor what's gone before? And speaking of honoring what's gone before, that's a really important thing. When there's a family like ours that has loss, it's important to let those kids grieve and have a picture of their dad or their mother and not be intimidated by that. That doesn't mean they don't love the new parent. It means they want to remember the old one. If I can say anything to those of you that are step parents, this is the thing. Be mature and don't take everything personally. They're choosing to love a parent that's died or a parent that is no longer in the home is not a rejection of you. It's an alignment with who God gave them to be their parent in the first place. They were asked to love that parent. God gave them that parent. That is their precious parent. and you're coming in as a secondary parent, should give you permission to be a little chill. You are not responsible for all of it. You are responsible to love them, support them, and cheer for them. But the outcome is not entirely on you. That should be good news. They were given 2 original parents, and you are coming in to be a supporter, not to rewrite history. You will not rewrite history, trust me. It will not happen. They are going to be who they were starting to be. And the best you can do is help move them in a positive way. Help them see it's really hard that your parents are divorced. That is awful, but we'll make sure you see your mom as much as we can help you. And not be jealous of that mother, even if she's the Disneyland mom that walks in with 225 bags at Christmas. Who cares? Have the relationship. Don't have envy. Take all those malice, bitterness. Don't clothe yourself in that. It is not going to serve you well. What is going to serve you well is intentional relationship with these kids, because they're trying to figure out their new role in the family. They're trying to figure out how to be a stepchild, a step-sibling, a real bio-sibling, and a real bio-kid. It's overwhelming. Speaking of that, also realize one of the interesting things that happens when we blend kiddos is that we move into a space of everybody getting a little shifted around. So, in our case, my stepsister is absolutely 2 years younger than the youngest kid. It was kind of picture perfect, boom, 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 2 years younger. And if you look at the picture, it was really cute, wasn't it? I mean, it looked like a cute little family. But here's what was hard. My sister struggled because she had been the baby girl in the family, and suddenly there's a really cute one coming in behind her. And my brother was the youngest kid, the youngest child, and he was the youngest child in every way. And suddenly he had competition. In any family where you blend the kids, somebody's getting moved. As part of the CEO, that's part of the corporate merger. If the kids are older, the oldest kid is suddenly like, whoa, wait a minute, I got older siblings now? You're going to listen to them? Oh, no, it's my show. You see, they need their voices heard, and you can be wise by recognizing that kind of shuffling, putting people in between each other and moving the birth orders around, it hurts. It feels weird. And they didn't ask to get married, you guys did. So understand that the consequences of that, which they play out, need to be given a lot of grace and a lot of love. Because your birth order didn't change. You just went from unmarried to married again. They've got this whole, thingy-do going on that's kind of tricky, frankly. And so we need to have conversations that, first of all, talk about really hard subjects. And second of all, conversations that welcome and invite the challenges that the kids are facing. It should be okay for them to say that they're angry or that they feel like that was a bad decision or they felt like they were left out. You can retool. But if you don't have the conversation, they're just going to get angry. And they're just going to get to the point where they're like, well, clearly I'm like 14th in line here, so I'll figure it out. And so the more kids you have and the more kids you're blending, the more you want to look at them as individuals and see how you can meet their individual needs. And that brings us to our next slide, which is finding your place as a step parent. You want to build your own relationship with each child. Do not view them collectively. Here's one of my pet peeves. I hear it all the time everywhere I go. Well, we have her kids coming over this weekend. And I cringe. Or we're going to be going over, we're bringing his kids in for the holidays. No. When you say that, you've told me, I already know everything about your family. I don't even need to know another thing. I already know. They're her kids, they're your kids, they're not both of you. You have your family, she has her family, and everybody's just putting up with each other. What you need to say is, here's who's coming. We've got so, and so coming. And they are bringing their 4 little grandbabies, and we're going to have a wonderful week. And then next week, we're going to enjoy this, and this one. Because the way you tell me the story, I already have my ears up. I'm like, okay, I know everything I need to know. Her kids and my kids. No, they're your kids. That doesn't mean you own them the same way, but it's how you think of them. And the way you talk about them tells me a lot about how you think of them. Okay, if you're knowing them individually and you're getting to know them as people and not collections, if they're old enough, ask them things about how they want to be motivated. What kind of things motivate you? Well, for different kids, it's different. It's just like when they're toddlers. Toddlers and teens are the same thing. They just have, better wardrobes in a car. But they're really the same people. Toddlers work with stickers, and big kids work with, like Starbucks cards. You can earn a cash gift for doing certain things, motivation. So ask them what they've done before. What worked? What can I do to motivate you if you're having a hard time in school? Or what can I do to help you get your room clean? Ask them what you can do to motivate them. Don't assume you know. Let me tell you something. There's a great book out there. It's really old, but we're bringing it back. It was written, it's not up here, by the way, but it's called The Birth Order Book by Dr. Kevin Lehman. It's really old. It was written, I don't know, maybe the 70s. Boy, oh boy, is that a good book. And if you read that, that will help you remember the dynamic of each individual person based on their birth order. But knowing how they motivate and knowing what kind of discipline is best for them. With your own kids, you kind of know which ones do really well getting their phone taken away and which ones do better, having to have hard labor or whatever you do. But when you're a step parent and you're going to be disciplining those kids potentially, and I would really caution that you work together on that, you may not know what those things are that work. So be curious. Don't be confrontational, be curious. Find out what would feel good to them and what have they done in the past and what kind of things worked. It's a great way to get to know somebody by asking those kind of questions. And finally, learn the children's love language. And this book is up here. You may know the 5 love languages I think it's just called the 5 love languages. It was written by Gary Chapman and D. Ross Campbell. And they have a second book out called The 5 Love Languages of Children. And that book is helpful because one of the things you want to know is whether or not you have a child who really needs you to be a service person to them, or whether they need words of affirmation, they need you to be a cheerleader for them, or whether they need a hug. Those are our physical touch kids. They need a lot of hugs and they need a lot of elbow squeezes and high fives and all those kind of things. And then there's the kids who do better with quality time, where they just want to do something with you. And so as a step parent, it would be a gift to your stepchildren if you started to learn some of those truths about those kids, because that says to them, I love you enough, I care about you enough to know this about you, to know what your love language is, to know how I can motivate you when you need motivation, and how I can discipline you if you need it without making it abrupt and coarse. Because it's a rough thing to become a step parent when you have to do the part where you're disciplining. That's probably one of the hardest parts that goes into it. And finally, you will want to work with the other parent to create consistent experiences and expectations in both homes. And by the way, that is not always possible. That's a lofty goal. If there's a way to do it, but sometimes when the divorce has happened, sometimes there's a decision that the two adults make that they're going to live very, very differently. And there won't be any connection, and there won't be any co-parenting. And if that's the case, then you make the decision to be the good leader and make sure that you lead well. And also, don't say what you think about the other parent. If I tell you nothing else today, I'm going to say this to you. Be very, very, very careful what you say about the other parent. I don't care what they did to you. I really don't. If I'm the kid, I really don't. They're my dad. That's my mom. I know you don't like her. I know she did something that broke your heart. I know they behave badly, but that's the guy, that's the gal, that God gave me to be my mom or to be my dad. They didn't give them to you to be your mom or dad. They gave them to them. And please understand that when you speak harshly of their parents, it will break their heart. It's enough that they've lost that parent. It's enough that you have been divorced from that parent. You do not need to be judge and jury vocally over that parent. Can I tell you something? Kids grow up and they figure it out. They will figure out in their own good time, every time my mom was supposed to get me to take me for her custodial time, she was 2 hours late. They will figure that out. You do not need to say, well, this is the 4th time your mother hasn't been on time. That's something you talk about privately. You don't talk about that in front of the children. She'll figure it out. She'll know her mom has not been coming on time. They'll know whether or not their dad has done the things he said that he would do. I guess what I'm saying is, let them live through their own disappointments on their own calendar. And please don't make your disappointments theirs, because they were not married to this person. You were. They had a completely different relationship. They were the child, and they saw them through childlike eyes. And because of that, they don't see the story the way you do until they can be an adult. And even then, they won't see it the same way. They're blinded by parental love, and you were wounded by broken marriage. And if you can see that, that's a very mature thing. If you can see that they won't recognize it the way you do, they won't feel about it the way you do, and they won't ever experience it the way you did, then you have been a wise and careful person to be that discerning. The best thing is to always remember who you are in the story and who somebody else is in the story. Well, as a person who teaches the Bible, I have found this one thing to be a little interesting. We really don't have a lot of discussion about blended families in Scripture unless there's a book I've missed. Now, if you look in the Old Testament, we have a whole bunch of families, Abraham, Jacob come to mind, where they had multiple wives. You know, the sister wife thing where he's married to Rachel and he's married to Leah and the 3 concubines, and we have 12 kids. But here's the thing. All their mothers were their mother, and he literally was their father, biologically and in every way. So I'm going to just say this. From my definition, these do not qualify. I do not qualify that these people have blended families. But I do give one family credit for being a blended family, and it might surprise you. Jesus Christ. Do you remember that he had a dad that wasn't his dad? Joseph? Not his dad. And his mother was not married to him. They were dating. They were engaged. It was a bit of a town scandal that she was pregnant. And you know that by the mercy of God, both of them were visited by an angel and set straight in this matter. Because if it were not for Joseph getting the word that she had not dishonored him, we would have had a different story. He even said he was going to divorce her, but he didn't, because he found out the truth, because truth builds trust. And so what we have is a family that Jesus came into with a man who was not his father. Now, you can say, well, I've read the Gospels through, and I don't see a lot of texture here about how this went. No, there's one thing, though, that is unmistakable. Jesus was known as being the son of a carpenter. And who was the carpenter? Joseph. And so it tells me that Jesus grew up imitating his earthly father. He was an apprentice to him. He learned his craft. And can I say this? Kind of followed in his footsteps. What that tells me is that there was a dear relationship. Because if you did not like your stepfather, you probably would work to get a different career so you wouldn't run into him in the hallway at work or even at a corporate gathering of some kind. No, Jesus chose to do the very thing that he had watched Joseph do. He learned to be a carpenter. He learned to be a builder. And he learned to do the very things that his father had done to provide for that family. And that tells me he did a really, really good thing. And I don't mean to set the bar too high for you. I know when you find out Jesus is your biblical stepchild and Joseph is the biblical stepfather, it's a little heady. But for me personally, I don't find it heady. I find it comforting. Jesus has lived through everything we've lived through. He is the child with the stepfather. He is the mother. He has the mother and the father whose marriage was a little bit, you know, the conversation starter in town. He has half siblings that he grew to love. We read about them all through Scripture. And Jesus was for us a beautiful example of how to be part of a blended family and to know that your Savior knows your pain. And he knows how awkward it can be. And he knows all of the things that go into it. And on top of that, he can be trusted for wisdom. And boy, do I love that. I love to know that when we ask Jesus for wisdom in raising a blended family or being part of a blended family, that he gives freely to anyone who asks. And you know, part of the reason he gives it so freely is because he did it. He walked the very thing that we're talking about today. Oh, that gives me joy. And that gives me so much comfort because I can't imagine trying to talk to a God who came from a completely static situation with no bubbles and thinking that he could be trusted. Truth and trust. The truth is Jesus is a stepchild with a stepfather, and the trust that I have in him is greater because of that truth. And that makes me so incredibly happy. And you know, I have a little time, and I want to answer questions if you have them. Yes. Yes. Mm. Oh my goodness. Said what? I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is a blend though, because you're a new partner in the family. But I think there are certain times with adults when adults make a decision they want to be estranged. There's not much you can do about that except honor their estrangement and welcome them if they come back. Because sometimes life has a way of turning, you know. Oh, well, that's hard. And it's best that you keep those comments to yourself and not with the siblings because you want them to be able to rebuild if they can. And you don't know, but, you know, if they can. Yeah, BJ.
Just because we're being recorded, if we could have the questions out loud.
Just to add on to that, Lisa, if the estranged child chooses to be estranged, do you try to make any effort to rejoin them in the family?
If it's not your child, if it's your partner, pardon me, a grandchild, I think that you have to work through the channels to see what makes sense. I mean, I think it's always, if you had a special relationship with them, they might be open to having a relationship with you, but you kind of have to honor where they're at. And you never know all the things that cause people to be estranged. Sometimes they're utterly foolish and broken, and sometimes they know things that you don't. And things happen to them, and they experience things that may not always be public. That's one of the things I always say, children keep secrets pretty well. Sometimes things hurt, and they haven't told you about it, and you perceive it as an estrangement, but it's really for them a boundary that they need to put in place for their own perception of safety.
I just wanted to make a comment. So because of my situation, I did some Googling about estrangements, and I was amazed 25% of the families in the U.S. have an estrangement in their family, which just blew me away. Yeah.
I'm not surprised, and I think, I'm sorry to say this, but I think that's due to a lot of extremely poor counseling that's going on right now. And I don't mean to blame the entire community, but I guess I just did. I don't mean to. I know there's some excellent counselors out there. But there is a trend right now in counseling. Boundaries is like the middle word, the middle name of every experience in counseling right now. And they're teaching you to be safe and to have boundaries and to do all these things. And taken to the extreme, that becomes an estrangement. And I don't think that that's biblical. Sometimes it is. There are times Jesus brushed the dust off his feet and took off in certain situations. So it's not unbiblical, but it's overplayed. There's no question it's overplayed. And I'm sorry, but I think we have some counselors who read a book and thought, well, there's an easy out. Because really what it does is it solves the problem on a certain level. There's no problem. You just ignore the problem and ignore the person who causes the problem. That's not healing and that's not reconciliation. I call that an absence of engagement. It's really sad, truly.
Any others?
I guess one thing that I didn't hear addressed is I'm divorced and my ex-husband had an affair, so the idea that I should tell my kids that, that's a whole thing on itself. And now I'm remarried and my husband and I have a kid together.
Right.
And I didn't hear anything about when you have a kid together, do you have any advice on what that looks like or
Well,
anything?
related to your earlier comment about your ex-husband having an affair, that's something that your kids will need to learn at a certain age. I don't know how old your kids are, so I'm stabbing at this comment, but it's something that they need to know. It's part of their family history. I don't think they necessarily need to know it when they're 5, 6, and 7. They're probably old enough, but I would encourage your ex-husband to tell them. Mm-hmm. So it's his wife's fault that they had an affair? That's crazy. That's an absence of truth. That's not truth, and it won't build trust. Yeah, but your child that together, that story isn't related to your child. I mean, obviously, family history is family history. There'll come a time when you tell them, but it doesn't affect them because they're not biologically connected to your ex-husband, and the connection is they're half siblings, and if the half siblings are a lot older, they need to know before the little one does, and the little one only needs to know as a matter of history. It's not a matter of, there's no critique. It's like, this is what happened, and this is why we ended up divorced. And you can simply say there was a broken the relationship broke because someone else got involved. And they're married now. Yeah, well, I can tell you what I said, and I don't have this in my story, but my kids came home from Sunday school one day saying, "What is adultery?" And you're kind of like, whoops, we're in the car, I'm not ready for this, what are we going to say? And I was really thankful that I had heard someone say this before, so this isn't me, this is me quoting it. I heard a woman say, "Don't worry about that because adultery is something adults do. And when you get a little older, we can talk about it." And it was very hopeful because the kid that was asking was about 9, and we really hadn't even gotten into the complexity of all of the things, right? And when 9-year-old turned 11, the conversation came up again, and I said, "You know what that means? It means that that one of those married people seeks a boyfriend or a girlfriend outside of the marriage, and it breaks God's heart." And that's what I said, a boyfriend or a girlfriend, because that's really what it is. It doesn't always end up in a marriage, and sometimes the marriage comes back together with that in the path. So I said, they seek another boyfriend or a girlfriend, and it breaks God's heart. That also leaves you out of having to share how you feel about it, because it's devastating to be having been in that situation that you've been in. It's devastating. And it's hard to talk about it, but if you can put it on the Lord and how he feels about it and breaking his heart, you can get through the conversation and make it spiritual and not so personal. And your children need a good spiritual upbringing. I found that when I said that worked out really well, and it came up with every other kid. I used the same line, boyfriend or girlfriend that they shouldn't have had because they were married. And when we get married, that is our boyfriend or our girlfriend for all time. That's what I said. Simple answer, totally truthful, honors scripture, and doesn't get into the stuff that we're not ready to get into yet. And no details. We don't need details because it's still true what they did. How they did it, where they did it, don't need to know, don't want to know. Children don't give them a bag too big to carry. Anything else?
Well, Lisa, thank you so very much. Just to spur so many conversations, thoughts, topics. Appreciate that so much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
You bet. Let's say thank you to Lisa. Well, just a couple things coming up. Mark, if you want to put the upcoming announcements on the screen. Again, we're not meeting next week because you'll all be meeting someplace else or doing something else on Thanksgiving Day. But following that, the next week will be Dean Stinchfield will be sharing with us on restoring hope, one family. No, that was today. Repurposing and not retiring. And Dean Stinchfield has, and actually that's Dean, not Dan. But he'll be up sharing with us about that, and just it's not only his journey, but is very purposefully doing that to impact the hearts and lives of others. So thanks for being here today. Glad that you're here. If you have a question that you'd like to ask Lisa, feel free to do that for a little bit, and then enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much.